Hello, I'm Jerry Skinner, and today I want to talk about E.W. Marland. Honestly, I'd never heard of E.W. Marland till we went to Oklahoma and was doing some more videos, and somebody told us about the Palace on the Prairie, which I'd never heard of, but it's known now as the Marland Mansion. It's located in Ponca City, Oklahoma. So we went up there and I looked into E.W. Marland. What happened was he was an oil man and he struck oil in Ponca City and had more money than he knew what to do with. So he decides he's going to build this huge mansion, 55 rooms, 10 baths, 4 stories high, 43,000 square foot. Even had a swimming pool outside that was the same as 2 Olympic pools combined. He was a big spender. He made a fortune, but he liked to spend money. And but the good thing about him is he spent it on the people that worked for him. He actually employed at least 25% of Ponca City. And he did everything for the city. He built parks. He did all sorts of things for the kids of Ponca City. And the people that worked for him, he had his own refinery. And the people that worked for him, he paid them the highest price for their labor anywhere. He also built a restaurant, like a place at the at his refinery, so that people could come and eat for nothing anytime they wanted to. He also started building houses for his employees and charging them very, very little interest. He did all kinds of things. They had, and think about this was in the 1920s. They had insurance that he guaranteed for medical, for doctors, for medicine. He did all of those things. He was far ahead of his time. Nobody else did that. And today, if you go to Ponca City, they still think the world of E.W. Marland. E.W. Marland. Everything seemed to be going pretty good until his wife passed away. And she passed away just a little bit before this house was finished, that he spent $5.5 million on. When she passed away, him and his 2 adopted kids, George and Lydie, moved into the big house by themselves. After a few years, he had sent Lydie and George both off to some major colleges to get an education. And when they come back after, they was to take their place in Ponca City society, which they did. And but in the meantime, it had been several years and George had been living by himself, and Lydie would date, but it was always a question of, are they dating me because they like me, or is it my money? So anyway, what people had a problem with was that he fell in love, they fell in love with his adopted daughter. Now that creates a problem. So what he had to do is they had to go back to Pennsylvania, where the adoption took place, and get it annulled. A month after they got it annulled, they married. So he married his adopted daughter. She was 28 at the time, and he was 58. Okay, even her parents were against it, but, you know, what can you do? So after that, they only got to live in their mansion for a few months because it was 1928-29 when the stock market crashed. Well, oil prices dropped, and they were discovering oil in Texas, which didn't help. So when the oil prices dropped, he didn't want to quit paying and doing all the things for his workers that he'd been doing when he had lots of money. But now his money was running short, and he was using his own private funds to keep things going. So he needed 10 or 12 million, hoping that it would see him through till things got better. Well, he had always borrowed money from 2 or 3 different sources, but this time he wanted to make it simple and do it from one man or one firm. So he goes to New York and he talks to J.P. Morgan Jr. Bad mistake. He was dealing with crooks and didn't know it. So J.P. Morgan told him, I'll give you the money, but I want 3 of my people on your board. Well, he said, okay. So when he put 3 of his people on the board, what they started doing was they started buying these little bitty companies to, well, we need this little company because it'll help us, get bigger or get better. And we need this little. Well, each one of them was putting members on the board that was loyal to who. So pretty soon, he goes on vacation. When he gets back, he's no longer in control of his own company. They literally stole his company. They told him, they said, well, look, what we'll do is we'll give you a salary and we won't keep you on the board, but we'll give you a salary. And but you got to leave Ponca City. Well, heck, that was his company. And he said, no way, I'll just quit. So what he did, he resigned. He thought that him and George, his adopted son, would go and discover some more oil. Well, it didn't turn out that way. He spent a lot of what money he had left on that, but he was determined to get back at these money men in New York City. So he said, well, if I run for a representative, I might be able to do something. So he gets elected representative from Oklahoma. He goes up there to Washington. He finds out there ain't a darn thing he can do about those money people. So he comes back home and he says, well, if I'm the governor, at least I can save Oklahoma. He was elected governor. He saved Oklahoma from the oil tycoons. Now, he did that. However, he come out from the governorship with less money than he went in. So him and Lydie had to move into the chauffeur's house. They owned the chauffeur's house. It's a pretty good sized house there on the place. However, every day they'd have to step outside and look at that mansion that they could no longer afford. Couldn't pay the light bill. It was too much. So they first started selling off furniture. They had some expensive furniture. Super paintings that cost a fortune. They sold them. The next thing that they could get their hands on, of course, was the mansion itself. So they sold the mansion for $60,000 that they had paid $5.5 million to build. And they sold it to a religious group, the Carmichael Brothers. Anyway, they sold it to a religious group. Now the group, when they saw Lydie's statue that he had made, he He had Lydie's statue made along with George and along with his. But he kept Lydie's out on the grounds. And it was a little risque, I guess, for that time, surely, you know. But anyway, they said, you take the statue back of Lydie. We don't want it. It's too provocative for the brothers. It was just too provocative for the brothers, so they give them back the statue. Okay. So in a little while after his governorship, he passes on. That leaves Lydie there by herself. Spent about 10 years by herself. Very seldom got out, very seldom done anything. Then one day, she packs up her car that she can't drive because she didn't have a license. She never drove before. She had chauffeurs. She was living in a chauffeur's house. And she throwed in a few priceless paintings, took $10,000 and lit out. She wasn't seen for 20 years. Saturday Night Post had a big spread on, where is the First Lady of Oklahoma? Where's the First Lady? Where's Lydie? Had a national campaign. Where's Lydie? Nobody. Some of them said they seen her on the East Coast. Some of them said on the West Coast. Some of them said they seen her with a bunch of hippies. But nobody found her. Now, what happened after the 20 years, still don't know where the heck she went. All over, I guess. She had kept in touch with a lawyer there that was a friend of her husband's. And every year she had sent him a little money to pay the taxes on the chauffeur's cottage. So she made a mistake, I guess it was, and put a return address on the last one that she sent 20 years later. And when she didn't send enough through the years, he would make it up. He would pay the rest of it. But anyway, he found out where she was at, so he hurried up to try and get to find her because he needed her. The city wanted to buy the mansion and turn it into a museum. Well, they had to raise taxes in order to do that, and the people didn't much want to do that. So they needed Lydie to write a letter to the editor of the local paper asking the people to accept the tax bill and buy the mansion. So she did, but he said that when he first seen her, he didn't know her. She had it rough, and she looked like she had been on the dole, I guess, for 20 years. She was unkept. So, but he did talk her into coming back and writing that letter, which worked. They bought the mansion. Her house, the chauffeur's house, was in bad repair, so the city repaired their home, her chauffeur's mansion, for her. So she stayed for another 11 years before she passed away. And they said that the city, when they would have special occasions at night, maybe they'd have parties and there'd be music and this, that, other. And Lydie always loved to dance when she was young, and they had big parties for her in the mansion. And she did a lot of dancing and so on and so forth. But they say that they would see her out at the cottage sometimes swaying to the music. But she never come to the mansion. She never had anything to do with anybody. She was a recluse. One person asked her, why don't she tell her story? Why don't she write a book and tell her story? Their answer was, there's nothing to tell. My story is not any more important than anybody else's. And that's the way she left it. All right, let's watch The Oil Tycoon. We're traveling in the state of Oklahoma. We just turned north off Interstate 40 onto the Muskogee Turnpike towards Tulsa. We're on our way to Ponca City to see the Marland Mansion, known as the Palace on the Prairie, built by oil tycoon E.W. Marland back in 1928. The mansion was the largest private residence in the state of Oklahoma at that time. In 1925, Mr. Marland owned 1/10 of the world's oil reserves. He earned 2 fortunes during his lifetime and lost both of them. He was a good man surrounded by unjust gossip and innuendos. He helped raise his wife's niece, who later became his adopted daughter, and then become his second wife. Ernest Whitmore Marland was born on May the 8th, 1874 in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. He was the youngest and only son of 7 girls. His parents was Alfred and Sarah Marland. Marland's dad was a mill owner and had invented the steel belt that held cotton bales together, so he was able to afford a good education for his son. E.W., as Ernest will be called, always sought the approval of his dad and felt he never quite achieved it, no matter how wealthy he became. E.W. graduated from the University of Michigan Law School. After graduation, he returned to Pittsburgh and set up practice. On the 5th of November 1903, he married Mary Virginia Collins, the daughter of a Philadelphia court stenographer. While dealing in oil leases for clients, E.W. became interested in the fledgling oil business and began to speculate. By 1904, Marland had become a millionaire, but within 3 years he had lost his fortune from the 1907 panic. He had his money in 3 different banks, and all 3 went broke. With the oil business in Pennsylvania souring, E.W. began looking elsewhere, when a nephew of Marland suggested Oklahoma and was willing to introduce him to the Miller brothers, owners of the famous 101 Ranch located near Ponca City. He caught a train for Oklahoma. Investors had become extremely hard to find. Trying to save what money he had left, he contacted the owner of the Arcadia Hotel in Ponca City, telling him that he was looking for places to drill for oil, and if he struck it, he would make it worth his while if he would let him stay without paying. The owner agreed and said it was a good way for him to invest in the oil business. E.W. sent for Virginia, and she lived in the hotel while Marland was in the field drilling for oil. E.W. was always looking for investors, wherever he could find someone with money to invest. However, after 3 years of coming up dry wells, his investors were also drying up, including the hotel owner. In 1911, Marland barely had enough money for one more try. He had scouted a good place, and the geologist agreed with him. It was on the Ponca Indian land that belonged to a 19-year-old named Willie Cries for War. E.W. promised Willie $1,000 per year plus 12.5% profit on all of the oil taken from his 160-acre lease. Now, with the approval of the tribal chief, drilling began. This time it was different. At 1,500 feet, Marland hit a gusher. And soon there was another, and another. He was able to pay back his investors, including the Arcadia Hotel owner, and Willie Cries for War became a wealthy man. Unfortunately, Virginia and E.W. were unable to have children, and no one to share their wealth with. And there was a void in her life, with E.W. always tied up with business and his love for nightly poker games. Now this is an early picture of Virginia's nephew George standing on the left, Mrs. Collins, Virginia's mother, and Virginia. Sitting on the left is Lydie, Virginia's niece, E.W., with a neighbor girl. In 1912, Virginia's sister's two oldest kids, George, age 15, and Lydie, age 12, came for an extended visit to Aunt Virginia's and Uncle E.W.'s in Ponca City. Their parents, Margaret and George Roberts, were having a hard time taking care of their children. George was a pedal cart pusher. So in order to help her sister, the Marlands agreed to keep George and Lydie, and also gave the Roberts financial assistance. At the time, E.W. and Virginia was still living at the Arcadia Hotel. They began thinking about building a house of their own. They started the Grand House located at 1000 East Grand Avenue in Ponca City. It was a Renaissance revival style with one of the first indoor swimming pools in the state. Construction was started in 1914, but it won't be completed until 1916. In 1914, Virginia and E.W. adopted George and Lydie. She was 14 and George was 17. Now this is a picture of Lydie at the age of 16. Their parents agreed to the adoption, and Virginia was happy to have the children around. They started school in Ponca City, but soon E.W. wanted George and Lydie to go to the best schools back east. Lydie would visit her paternal parents during summer breaks and her other siblings. After she finished school, Lydie returned to Ponca City to take her place in local society. After all, E.W. employed 1/3 of Ponca City at the Marland oil refinery. Now this is Lydie with her favorite horse years later, Rose Bar. He was later buried on the grounds. Lydie and E.W. had a love for horses. Her brother George, after college, entered the military in World War I. After service, he returned to Ponca City to work for E.W. in the oil business. By 1920, Marland Oil held 10% of the world's oil reserves, and E.W. had a personal accumulated fortune of around $30 million. Although he had a never-ending desire to make money, he also spent money like water. E.W. was said to be generous to a fault, with ideas before his time. He seen that Marland Oil paid their employees above average wages. He also furnished free medical and dental care. He offered low-interest housing loans and built over 500 for his employees. He offered free meals at company cafeterias. He helped the town build parks and other recreational facilities for the citizens. He was especially generous to the children of Ponca City. Now back in 1910, when E.W. was broke and looking for investors, W.H. Bill McFadden invested and helped to save the company, becoming E.W.'s best friend and his executive vice president, later to become mayor of Ponca City. E.W. and Virginia was living in one of the most elegant modern homes in Oklahoma. However, he always wanted the biggest and the best, and now he could afford it. After a trip to Italy with the family and visiting Italian castles, he decided to come home and build one. In 1925, E.W. hired architects to draw up plans for the Palace on the Prairie, later to be called the Marland Mansion. The construction and furnishings will cost $5.5 million. It will take 3 years to build. Unfortunately, his wife Virginia, who helped with the plans, will not live to see the mansion finished. It is said that she suffered from cancer. She went to several places for treatment. In the last year, she stayed alone, not accepting family or friends, only the doctor once a day to administer a shot, believed to have been morphine. Mary Virginia Collins Marland passed away on June 6, 1926, from pneumonia believed to be related to cancer. Virginia was 49 years old. Virginia was well loved in Ponce City, and the day she died, the entire city shut down. That same year, E.W. hired a noted sculptor to do statues of Lydie, George, and himself, to be placed on surrounding grounds of the mansion. In 1926, and the death of Virginia, Marland Oil was refining their own oil in their refinery, transporting oil and gas to 11 states with their own railroad tank cars to over 500 Marland service stations. Unfortunately, new oil fields was being discovered in Texas, and soon there was more oil on the market than could be used, driving the price down. With Marland paying employees higher wages, health care, and so on, and not having the heart or foresight to cut back on expenses, he was soon putting some of his own personal funds into the business and searching for more money to get through the downturn. E.W. had always found money from dozens of different investors. However, he wanted to simplify things by getting money from one place, J.P. Morgan Jr. For $12 million, Morgan wanted to purchase shares in Marland Oil and demanded 3 of his people on the Marland board. For some reason, E.W. agreed. By 1928, E.W. and Lydie had fallen in love. He was 54 and she was 28. It was a case of forbidden love. They enjoyed the same things: horses, fox hunting parties. All of Lydie's suitors was at a disadvantage. The question was always there. Was it her or her money they loved? E.W. was also a lonely man after Virginia was gone. Sometime around 1928, E.W. and Lydie rode in his private rail car to Pennsylvania to have the adoption annulled. The next month after having the adoption annulled, on June 2, 1928, was the opening day of the Marland estate. Everyone wanted to come out and see what $5.5 million could create. 2 months after the opening, the couple goes back to Pennsylvania on July the 14th, 1928. They were married in the living room of Lydie's parents. The marriage was a shock to everyone, including Lydie's parents. The newspapers had a field day, claiming Lydie's mother was crying in disbelief that E.W. was marrying his wife's niece and his once adopted daughter. Determined to fight all the gossip and face everyone, actually brought the two closer together, us against the world sort of thing. The couple took a long honeymoon across Canada and returned to their newly finished mansion in September. Behind the scenes, operatives of J.P. Morgan had been plotting to take over Marland Oil. They had acquired small companies that were supposed to help stabilize Marland Oil. Unfortunately, these companies were loyal to J.P. Morgan, giving him more control. Less than 2 months after E.W. and Lydie moved into the mansion, on November the 1st, 1928, E.W. Marland was voted out of his own company by the executive board devoted to J.P. Morgan. They offered E.W. a powerless position as executive director on the board with a large salary if he would leave Ponce City. E.W. knew that he would not be able to affect company policy, so he resigned his position with Marland Oil along with loyal board members and his vice president and friend Bill McFadden. Marland Oil Company is now ConocoPhillips Oil. To make things worse, the new president, Dan Marland, moved into E.W. and Virginia's grand home on Grand Avenue. E.W. intended to form another oil company and rebuild his empire with his son George. It wasn't to be. Investors were impossible again to find. Even though the stock market crashed in 1929, Marland continued living the affluent life. Now here we are arriving at the Marland Mansion, located at 901 Monument Road in Ponca City. It has 55 rooms, 4 levels, 10 bedrooms, 7 fireplaces, 13 bathrooms, and 3 different kitchens. It has 43,561 square feet with heating and cooling throughout the house. This was incredible for 1928. The building was 78 feet wide and 184 feet long. At the time that E.W. and Lydie lived in their mansion, there was a pool at the east end of the building, the size of 2 Olympic swimming pools. Years later, it'll be filled in. As we enter the mansion, notice the doors that were custom made in New York. And as you enter, on the left is the statues of Lydie and her brother George. E.W. had his favorite sculptor, Joe Davison, create them from French limestone. For years they stood outside on the mansion grounds, but later cleaned and restored to their original condition and brought inside. The formal Elizabethan dining room is the first door on the left as you walk into the building. The walls of the dining room are hand-cut panel from rare English pollard oak, cut from the royal forest of England, with the special permission of the king. Next to the formal dining room is the small breakfast room where E.W. would usually have breakfast. It's been said it was his favorite room. The small breakfast room is located next to the service kitchen. Meals from Marland's formal dining guests were cooked in the large kitchen on the lower level and then transferred by dumbwaiter to the service kitchen for presentation. In 1928, this kitchen was a modern marvel. It was a luxury enjoyed by the staff. The steam dishwasher and the ammonia-powered refrigerators are originals. The big safe stored the family silver. The intercom system was equipped with a light panel for each kitchen. Up the stairs from the service kitchen is the north salon or the sunroom. E.W. gathered artists from all over the world and spared no expense. This room was to display Marland's international collection of tapestries, paintings, and artwork. The bronze light fixtures weighs 250 pounds each. On the north wall hangs a portrait of E.W.'s closest friend, W.H. Bill McFadden. Back in the hallway, the ceiling is Chinese Chippendale. It was painted on canvas in the lower level of the mansion and then applied to the plaster overhead. The work was so precise that there is no distortion of the figures even though the ceiling is curved. The floor is made of crushed marble and concrete. Next is the ballroom, where lavish parties and dances were held. Lydie loved to dance, and this picture is a moment in time capturing her dancing. The ballroom ceiling pattern features gold leaf The lighting for the ballroom is a Weatherford crystal chandelier with an iron rod base. To replace the ceiling and chandelier today would cost an estimated $2 million. Hanging on the north wall are portraits of E.W. above the fireplace, and to the right is Lydie wearing a Spanish mantille that E.W. had purchased for her. A recreation of the original portrait of George is on the left. This is the south salon, or the living room. E.W. would stand on the south terrace and welcome party guests into this room before taking them into the ballroom. Now in the hall is the original elevator that still works today. It's lined with buffalo leather and was the second oldest elevator in a private residence in the United States. The first was the White House. The Hersheyford clock still stands in the original position. And now we're going upstairs, where the family living quarters are located and all the guest rooms. On the stairwell on the east wall hangs an original oil painting by a Dutch artist, Bernard de Hoog. E.W.'s adopted son George's living quarters was on the west side of the wing, and Lydie's and E.W.'s living quarters was on the east side. George's dressing room and bathroom opens into a large corner room with a fireplace. Now this was George's sitting room. Next to the sitting room is the bedroom. George at this time was contemplating getting married. Now down the hall on the right is one of the guest bedrooms. The furniture in this room is furnished with furniture used by a teenage Lydie while living in the first Marland mansion on Grand Avenue. Across the hall is the premier suite in the mansion. It's believed that this is the room that Will Rogers stayed in during his several trips. Now we go back to the stairwell and head down the hall to the east side. Now this is the terrace suite. A lamb wool rug and distinctive yellow bathrooms are featured in this suite. This opens to the third floor terrace. The dumbwaiter carries food from the main kitchen on the lower floors up to the other floors. Now this is the next terrace suite, leading to the north terrace. And this terrace suite filled with original Marland furnishings. If we cross the hallway, we see Lydie Marland's living quarters. Her sitting room is connected to her Louis XV style bedroom. Lydie donated her bed back to the museum in the 1980s. The fireplace is of Italian pink marble. Off her bedroom is her dressing room and bath. It also connects with E.W.'s bedroom and sitting room. E.W.'s elaborately carved bed, chest of drawers, and dressers were originals and returned to the mansion in 2012. Marland's bathroom features an electric sauna, believed to be one of the first in the United States. E.W. had water buildup from heart trouble, so he designed the sauna to help him get rid of the water. The bath is English Tudor. From the bath you can go into the library. It was E.W.'s private study, designed to be a restful room. Now the desk and furnishings was used by Marland when later he'll become governor. They say he would sometimes stand and look out the window towards Lydie's statue on the north lawn. Now we're going back down from the third floor living quarters to the lower level. As you come through the west wing front door, you walk down the grand stairway to the lower level. On the left was the main kitchen and pantry, and on the right, at the time the Marlands lived here, It was an indoor handball court, but it now serves as administrative offices. Straight down the hall is the lounge and hunt kitchen. Before the fox hunts that both E.W. and Lydie loved, the group would gather here, where breakfast would be cooked in the hunt kitchen and served. Now, to the right of the kitchen is a small secret poker room, where all men would come gather for high-stakes poker games. From the poker room, there's a 500-foot tunnel running to the boathouse and to the art studio. It was a good escape route if needed while Prohibition was in effect. Next to the hunt room is the outer lounge or summer room, where swimmers like Lydie and George and friends would swim and then play games in the outer lounge. By 1931, E.W. was no longer able to continue living in the mansion that he had created. Unable to pay the tremendous electric bill and having to lay off 30 to 40 servants was heartbreaking. Several of his closest servants remained with him as long as they could without being paid. His attempt to start another oil company had failed. His resentment against the Eastern bankers like J.P. Morgan and their business practices drove him into politics, thinking that he could change things. When E.W. closed the mansion, he and Lydie moved into the art studio, and for the next several years would only open the mansion on special occasions. When the mansion closed, E.W.'s son, George, and his new wife, Laverne, moved into the gatehouse, and George bought a part interest in a local Buick dealership. In 1932, Marland was elected to the U.S. House of Representatives for the 8th Congressional District of Oklahoma. He was a fan of President Franklin Roosevelt and his New Deal policy. He found out soon enough that there was little he could do to curb the Eastern money men as a representative. So he only served one term and thought that he could keep their predator practices out of Oklahoma. So he ran and was elected in 1935 as the 10th governor of the state of Oklahoma. He created the Oklahoma Highway Patrol, but big banks had gained such a hold on Oklahoma oil, the Oklahoma legislature fought him at every turn. Now this is Lydie's official portrait as Oklahoma's First Lady. And this is Lydie on the right, Mrs. Rittenhouse, E.W.'s sister, Mrs. George Marland, and George.
Oklahoma City authorities said that I could not drill these wells, but they granted foreign oil companies permits to drill right up against the state land and take the oil. In order to protect the interests of the state, protect the state land, I declared martial law and ordered out a squad of the National Guard to prevent civil authorities from interfering with our operation. The city attempted to enjoin me in the lower courts, but the Supreme Court upheld my contention. So now everything is okay. The oil is ours. Soldier boys have gone home. Millions of barrels of oil belongs to the state.
When E.W.'s term was over as governor in 1939, he had lost most of what money he had. To ensure that he would not benefit financially from the governor's office, except regular salary, put his investments in trust during his tenure as governor. He had less money when he left the governor's office than he did when he entered. E.W. and Lydie moved back to Ponca City. They moved into the chauffeur's cottage. Strapped for money, they first began selling furniture out of the mansion that he still owned. In the first part of 1941, Marland was forced to sell his beloved mansion. He sold his $5.5 million home for $66,000 to the Carmelite Catholic religious order. After the mansion was sold, his son George and family moved from the guardhouse to Tulsa, where he worked as an oil lease and royalty broker. George will pass away in 1957 from a heart attack. 6 months after selling the mansion, on October the 3rd, 1941, Ernest Whitmore Marland, E.W., passed away from congestive heart failure here at the chauffeur's cottage where he was living with his wife, Lydie. He was buried at the Oddfellow Cemetery in Ponce City at the age of 67. Lydie will continue to live alone in the chauffeur's cottage that E.W. had left her in his will. It's believed by some Ponce City residents that Lydie might have been bipolar. Of course, nobody knew what bipolar was at that time. She will live the next 10 years as a recluse, very seldom, if ever, appearing in public. In 1948, the Carmelite religious order sold the Marland mansion to the Felician Sisters, an order of the Catholic nuns, for $50,000. Before the sale, the brothers had the statue of Lydie moved from the mansion grounds to the chauffeur's cottage. They thought it was too provocative for the brothers to handle. In 1953, something strange happened. Without saying a word to anyone, Lydie loaded her 1949 green Studebaker with expensive paintings and tapestries plus $10,000 in cash and left Ponce City, even though she couldn't see very well and had no driving license. It'll be 2 years later before her brother George will become so worried he'll file a missing persons report. The Saturday Evening Post wrote an article, "Where is Lydie Marland, the First Lady of Oklahoma?" For years, the public was looking for the Princess of Oklahoma. Through the next 22 years, Lydie Marland disappeared from public view. Several reports claimed to have seen her on the West Coast, and then others on the East Coast, but nothing for sure. However, we do know that Lydie spent her first 2 months at the newly opened Moonlight Motel in Independence, Missouri, in Unit Number 1. The owners didn't know who she was until a year later. They said that she even asked if she could help clean rooms because she had never had a job before. Then all of a sudden, after 2 months, without a word, she was gone. During the 22 years Lydie was missing, she stayed in touch with her lawyer and friend in Ponce City and continued sending money for taxes on the cottage. Sometimes not sending enough, so the friend would make up the difference. The public was interested in why she left Ponce City so sudden. Some say that it appeared that living 10 years alone after E.W.'s death, she met a utility worker that came each month to read the meter. He later come to do minor repairs around the cottage. Eventually, it developed into a romance. Something happened that disappointed Lydie. So before she left, she hired someone to destroy her statue and bury it. She may have broke up the face herself. The statue will stay buried for over 22 years until it was found. In 1975, the attorney that Lydie had sent tax money through the years for the cottage located her from a return address. He told her that the sisters were selling the mansion and that the town of Ponce City wanted to make a museum out of it. But they had to raise taxes in order to get the $1.5 million the sisters were now asking. She agreed to meet him and discuss her situation. The attorney said that he could hardly recognize the 75-year-old Lydie. She looked unkempt, wearing out-of-date clothes and bad teeth. He tried to persuade her to return to the cottage, and she agreed. The cottage needed repair, so the city paid for it. She also agreed to write a letter to the local paper asking the people to approve the purchase of the mansion, which they did. In 1976, the Marland Mansion was opened to the public. On occasion, people said that when the city held dances or functions at the mansion, they would sometimes see Lydie at a distance, swaying with the music, but she would never come close to the mansion. She continued living alone for the next 11 years. On the 5th of July, 1987, Lydie Roberts Marland passed away at the age of 87. She's buried at the Oddfellow Cemetery Mausoleum in Room 1 with her husband. It is said that only 6 people attended Lydie's funeral. A few weeks after her death, a letter arrived at the headquarters of the Conoco Oil Company from a man stating that he was the one that Lydie had asked to destroy and bury the statue back in 1953. He wrote that he had buried the pieces like she had asked him to, but he couldn't destroy it completely. The figure was located, and after 2 years' restoration, it now stands inside the entrance to the Marland Mansion. Lydie once told friends, "So many people ask me to tell them my story. They'd be so disappointed. There's really no story to tell."